Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be going through and sharing my thoughts and opinions and favourite scenes on the Thriller Bark saga of One Piece, as well as the Sabaody arc. I don't want to give away too much, but I did really enjoy Thriller Bark as well as Sabaody, because I really enjoy like that creepy theme and the creepy style of it. If you are new here, I have posted 2 previous videos going through my initial thoughts on One Piece, so with the East Blue saga and Skypiea, just those initial first arcs and sagas. And I did my most recent one on Water 7 and CP9, as well as that small little Foxy Pirates filler arc at the start. So if you haven't watched those yet, please make sure to go check those out before you watch this video. But other than that, let's go straight into it. We start the saga off with a filler arc, and this one was called Ice Hunter arc, I believe it was. This one starts off with the crew stumbling across this rundown ship, and it has like a bunch of crew members on board, and their captain Puzzle is severely injured. So Chopper hops on board to try and save him and to try and get him back to being healthy again. Luffy ends up in his own little world as usual and ends up not being on the ship at some point, and then that's when the family is able to steal the flag. The Achino family love stealing flags of pirate ships so that they can add it to like their collection. We see later on the head of the family member, I think they call him Papa, but he has a room that's just full of flags from pirate ships that they've stolen it from. And then the whole arc is basically the Straw Hat crew minus Luffy trying to get their flag back before Luffy realizes that the flag has disappeared, because they don't want Luffy to find out that they were able to let the flag go. And that was probably the funniest part of this whole arc. And when they came to the conclusion at the end where they're all just battling it out, that's probably the funniest part, where Luffy just has absolutely no idea what's going on and why the crew are so determined on fighting these people and trying to get inside and trying to get their flag back. Overall, it was kind of just, it was a filler arc, so I didn't fully enjoy it. I think I liked the Foxy Pirates filler arc better. I think that just had a bit more substance to it. Other than that, I just didn't really enjoy it that much. But I will say, it was pretty funny the way that the whole time that they were after this flag, Zoro ends up getting lost, and then he finds his way into Papa's room with the flags, and he has absolutely no idea what's going on the whole time. So he just ends up there in the lion's den, I guess. After this filler arc, the crew ends up making their way to Fishman Island. This is basically their main goal of the island that they're wanting to reach since the beginning of Water 7, when they first heard about it. Now the crew have been on all of these multiple adventures. They've been on these like action-packed fights and battles and all of these adventures. I have to say that some of my favorite moments have to be when they're all, as in between the adventures and in between all of the battles, and they're all just going about their business on the ship. So they've gone and they've finished these battles, and then now they're sailing on the ship and they're all going about their business, doing their usual things. Chopper is researching. Usopp and Luffy, sometimes Chopper as well, are just like goofing around, having fun. Then Zoro is napping in his tower at the top. Then Frankie is working on weapons, sometimes with Usopp as well. They're working on weapons, trying to invent new things. Nami is working on her map, and Robin is just sitting with a glass of wine, reading a book, something like that. And I absolutely love those moments, because I look at it and I think, I just want to be a part of this crew so bad. I just want to be one of the members. It would just be awesome, because that's like kind of like their downtime, and when you get to see how much fun that they're actually having and how much that they've all bonded and come together. So I think that would have to be some of my favorite moments. Whilst they're on their ship doing their usual thing, going about their business, a barrel ends up appearing in the middle of the ocean. So they end up picking up this barrel, and it's a bit of an unusual, sus barrel, but they open it nonetheless, and it ends up like exploding up and having smoke up in the air, kind of like a signal. So it has like this massive signal that goes up into the air. And the next thing they know, they're in this creepy, misty Florian triangle, and they basically have no idea where they are. All of a sudden, they hear some ominous music coming from the distance, and that's when they encounter Brook's ship. In the end, Luffy decides that he wants to explore the ship. Of course he does. He brings Zoro and Nami along so that he doesn't make any stupid decisions. And spoiler alert, he does, but it works out in the end. Anyway, they board the ship and they end up meeting Brook, who is a living skeleton. And whilst Nami and Zoro are scared out of their minds because they're just come face to face with this living skeleton, Luffy, when he was just like, after maybe 5 minutes, he goes to Brook, I like you, join my crew. And then there's just Nami and Zoro's reaction of, sorry, what? What are you doing right now? Why are you inviting this creepy skeleton on board? Not to mention that Brook asked to see Nami's underwear basically straight up. So he's just all around creepy at this point. But Luffy is just like, you know what? Join my crew. I like you. You make me laugh. Come aboard. I will say one thing about Luffy is he can be very, very impulsive. He's a very, very impulsive character, but he's very intuitive as well. He'll go about and he'll just do things the way that he feels is necessary, and he'll just do it, and he does it out of his own intuition. And I really like that about his character. It keeps it interesting. I like that he doesn't really have a logical explanation as to why he does these things or how they work out in the end, but in the end they do work out. So I like that he just uses his intuition every time. Luffy invites Brook over to the ship to have dinner, and Brook he's very excited, and he's a very excitable person. He's very quirky, I find, as a character. At this moment I was like, this is a very quirky character. And he ends up going on board, and then this part was also really funny when Usopp, he's just like going about his business, and all of a sudden he's just in a uniform where he has a cross around his neck, and he has, I forgot even what jewelry he had on, but he just was in his full getup, maybe garlic. Actually, I think he had garlic around his neck. He was just out to repel the ghosts and out to repel all evil things. I really like that part. As he's about to play the violin, they all have like this massive banquet dinner, and Brook is having the time of his life. Luffy is having the time of his life because he's loving Brook so much, and everyone else is just like, what on earth is going on? Why is this living skeleton on this dining table right now? What is he doing here? But Luffy finds out that he can play music, so Brook ends up, whipping out a violin, and as he's about to play, a ghost appears. And this is where things kind of kick off. Now they're in Thriller Bark, and the arc actually it starts off pretty creepy just by that one scene where this invisible monster licks Robin, and that was in itself very creepy. But after this, they kind of split up into 3 groups. Nami, Usopp, and Chopper end up going ashore first. They are literally the 3 biggest scaredy cats of the whole crew, so it's pretty funny that they're the first ones to go ashore, and then the rest stay on the ship. So we first end up following them to Hogback's mansion, who Chopper is just a massive fan of and has so much admiration for. So we end up following them to the mansion, and on the way they get dropped off at a zombie yard, like a graveyard. It's like a graveyard that zombies kind of rise out of, and they are battling one-on-one trying to fight off these zombies. In the end, Usopp fights them off with fire, so he figures out that fire is what scares off these zombies. Then they make their way to Hogback's mansion, and they encounter Sindri, who is a very interesting character. She loves plates. She loves throwing plates, and she comes up with like these sarcastic remarks all the time. And I swear, I'm in absolute awe of Oda's imagination, because I have no idea how he comes up with such insane characters and such like interesting portrayals of characters, because this just really highlights that. All of these quirky characters really shows how awesome his imagination is and how insane it is. It's really cool. This is when they meet Hogback, who kind of has a Dracula sort of appearance, and then they are invited into the mansion to have dinner. After dinner, that's when Nami is taking a bath. Is in this actually really nice bathroom, because this place is a mansion. It's quite nice. And Usopp and Chopper are guarding the door. And then that invisible monster, who is an absolute creep, comes from nowhere again and starts being an absolute creep again, and just gets all up in Nami's krill. And then things start to kind of develop from there, where she realizes this place isn't really what it's set out to look like. Like, this isn't very an inviting place. So after this, they try to escape from that room, and they end up in Sindri's bedroom. And going through all of her stuff, they realize that she is not actually, well, she was a famous actress from 10 years ago, and then now she's turned into this zombie. So they kind of find out the truth behind Sindri, and that she was probably forced into this situation. Then after this, they end up getting attacked by more zombies that hopped out of the chest that was in the room. Then they run, and they end up in Hogback's lab. And this is where they learn the origin of the zombies. At this point, I'm really loving the horror feel of the whole island, with all like the lurking ghosts and the zombies and the haunted mansion. It's a bit of a nostalgia throwback for me, because it brought me back to movies like Casper the Friendly Ghost, Haunted Mansion, Skeleton Key. That was like one of my favorite movies at one point. So because I'm such a big scary movie fan, I really loved the feel of the island. The rest of the crew, they all are now ashore, and they're making their way through the island, and they encounter these ghosts. It's the same ones that they saw on the ship when they first got into Thriller Bark. And these ghosts, when they go through them, they realize that it makes them depressed. And at this point, they figure out that the island is actually a ship. And the captain of the ship is one of the warlords of the sea, Gecko Moria. Throughout some of the smaller little battles that they end up fighting, Zoro and Sanji end up going missing. And later on, we find out that they've turned into zombies. And this is all that was happening in Hogback's secret lab. They were turning these people into zombies. That's the big intro into Thriller Bark. From then on, we start to get into some of the smaller battles that lead up to the big battle with Gecko Moria. The first one is where Sanji is a zombie and he enters into the scene. And then you figure out that he is the zombie because he's trying to protect Nami, because he can't hurt women. That's just not in his nature. So we kind of figure out that is Sanji at that point. And this is also when Lola, who is a massive hog, she doesn't hog things, but she's literally a hog as a zombie, and she enters the scene, and we find out that she is in love with Absalom, who is we actually figure out that Absalom is the invisible monster that has been creeping around licking women, trying to get all up in their grill. So at this point, we figure out who that is. Lola's main goal is to marry Absalom, and then Absalom's main goal is to marry Nami, because after the bath scene, he figured that he wants to marry her. She's exactly his type. So his main goal is to try to capture Nami and bring her back and try and marry her. However, Lola and Nami end up forming this bond, because this whole time Lola is after Nami, just because Absalom is after Nami as well. So Lola is jealous of Nami and is trying to kill Nami because Absalom is in love with Nami. And it's just like this romantic comedy thing situation going on. I couldn't keep up. But that's what happens. And Lola and Nami end up forming a bond, and they become friends, and that's kind of like the true nature of friendship, don't need men. That's kind of what that was going for. The next battle is with Luffy, Robin, and Frankie. They end up fighting one of the major zombie generals, Tararan, saying it right. So they end up fighting him. And this part is also where Brook returns. He makes his big entrance into the massive foyer or courtyard, into the massive courtyard, and ends up helping them fight off a few of the zombies. here is also where we found out that salt is what actually kills the zombies. Well, it doesn't kill them, but it's what makes their souls return to their actual body. So their souls get sucked out of the zombie body and they end up returning to their everyday body. Now, this is also the part where Brooke goes into a lot more of his backstory and how he ended up where he is today. And it is the part where we found out that 50 years ago, he left a baby whale with his crew before entering the Grand Line. And that whale's name was Laboon. This part absolutely blew my mind. I was so shocked at this revelation and this twist in this story because I wasn't expecting that. I kind of knew that Laboon would come back at a later stage or something would happen with Laboon, but I was not expecting that this would happen. And so Brooke, for the past 50 years, has been trying to make his way back to Laboon, back to his friend. I genuinely gasped at this connection. It was crazy. And it was also really sad because later on when you see how Brooke is like his heart is hurting because he is thinking about Laboon and he's trying to get back to Laboon. I swear to God, my heart was hurting as well at that point. It was such an emotional scene, an emotional connection. And I am so keen to see where that ends up in the future. And if Brooke is able to see Laboon again, I really, really hope so. The next big scene is when Luffy's shadow is stolen. So amidst all of this fighting with Terrarin, amidst all of that fighting, Luffy is taken away and his shadow is stolen. And it is then put into Oars, who was an ex-prisoner, I think is an ex-prisoner. This part is pretty funny when Oars wakes up and he's screaming out for food and meat. He wants meat. And throughout the whole thing, he goes around saying that he's going to become the Pirate King. And he tries to put on a straw hat out of a building, like rips out pieces of a building to try and make himself a straw hat. I found that pretty funny. It's like the pure essence of Luffy. I like how they've really captured the pure essence of all of these characters and put them into these zombies, so you can really know that that is them. Then we shift to Usopp, Frankie and Robin, and they've made their way back to the ship to find Luffy, Zoro and Sanji's bodies after the shadow was taken from them. And they tried their absolute best to wake them up. They were hitting them. They were just using absolute force to try and wake these three up. And I have to say, one of the funniest, I think it has to be the funniest moment for me in this arc, is when Usopp was like, all right, guys, let me handle this. And he just yells out, he goes, a beautiful lady swordsman with meat, or something like that. And they wake up. They're just all of a sudden awake. It was a funny scene. I really enjoyed that. After this, Sanji and Usopp are off to rescue Nami from Absalom. Robin, Frankie and Zoro are off to help Brooke. And then Luffy is off to try and fight Gecko Moria. On their way there, Sanji, Frankie, Usopp and Zoro end up running into Perona. Now, Perona is also a very quirky character and a funny character in her own way. But she's the one that is controlling all of the ghosts that, run through everyone and make them all negative. The fight between Usopp and Peroni would have to be one of my favorite fights. Like, I'd have to say it is. The moment where Perona sends her ghosts through everyone. So Zoro, Frankie and Sanji, they all have these ghosts go through them and they're spouting out all of these negative things and all these depressing things. Usopp is just standing there and all the ghosts go through him and he's not fazed. He's just standing there like, yep, nothing's wrong. And Perona is sending out all of her biggest attacks, all the ghosts, trying to get him to be negative and fall on his knees, but he's just standing up straight. Perona is just in shock as to why Usopp is just standing there. So she yells out to him, why are you not negative? Why are you not all depressed? And then Usopp just yells back saying, I have always been negative. And then Perona just starts feeling sorry for him. That was a pretty funny moment. Also later on, when Perona and Usopp encounter each other again in another battle, and Usopp uses his 10-ton strength hammer to get her down, and he also covers her in all of these cockroaches, like using a shock factor to try and shock Perona. and he uses his 10-ton hammer, which is actually just an inflatable balloon, so it actually has no weight to it at all, and that ends up knocking her out of this whole battle, and he ends up defeating her in that way. I'm really starting to like Usopp a lot more since Enies lobby, because he's using a lot more like psychology and a lot more strategy than a lot of the other characters. So I definitely starting to like Usopp a lot more since then. Then we have the other fights, which is between Sanji and Absalom, which is basically just a fight between perverts, because Sanji admits that he wanted to get the clear fruit so that he could go and perv on women while they bathe. So they're just out together fighting between perverts. Then there's the other battle between Zoro and the zombie general. That was a pretty epic battle. Zoro ends up winning and getting the cool katana, which was a good moment. Skipping forward to the battle with oars, which most of the crew have come back together. So it's Chopper, Robin, Frankie, Zoro, Sanji. They're all battling oars, and they're in a really bad space battling oars because oars is so strong. So they're basically getting defeated, and there's that moment when Frankie kind of gets out his arms and he gets everyone into the stick docking formation, I'm pretty sure it was. This scene would have to be one of my favorite scenes because everyone jumps on board. They're all just, docking onto his, Chopper's docking onto his arm, Usopp docking onto his arm, Sanji and Zoro, I think they're on his legs or they're somewhere around on his body. They've all docked, they're all ready to go. And then Chopper looks over at, it was his arm, and is like, where's Robin? Robin hasn't docked. And Robin is just standing there just like, 人として恥ずかしいわ。人として恥ずかしいわ。I love her. She's literally my favorite character. She's great. And then everyone is just all like, what? Why have you not docked, Robin? After that, Zoro and Sanji are just beside themselves because they just cannot believe that they allowed themselves to do such an embarrassing thing. And Robin is the only one that was like, there's absolutely no way I'm doing that. That's not going to work. Then Luffy enters the scene and he's all jacked up because he was able to consume 100 shadows. And this was from Lola's actual human body and all of her crew that ends up helping Luffy so that he could try and defeat Gecko Moria so that they could all get their bodies back. So he enters the scene and he starts battling with Gecko Moria. I think one aspect I really loved of this scene and of this whole battle is seeing how every one of the crew members knew what to do and where to go and how to interact with every other crew member. It's like they all knew their place and they all knew what they were supposed to do. Ever since CP9, they've been able to grow and understand each other's abilities and strategies. So we're at this point now where they don't even have to speak. They don't even have to talk. They're just like, I'll do this, you do that. I'll jump on you if you can help me do this without even speaking. It's like they can fully rely and trust on each other and trust what each one of them is going to do. And it's really exciting to see at this point because I know that they're going to continue to grow and grow and grow. So I'm so keen to see where they're going to be at, when the time skip, because I know that happens. So I'm keen to see where it all takes them. After defeating Oz and Moria, another warlord enters the scene, Kuma. And because Kuma is so insanely strong, he basically wipes everyone out, except for Luffy because Luffy is already passed out. And at this moment, after getting beatings and beatings and beatings, Zoro ends up sacrificing himself for the crew. He basically knocks out Sanji because Sanji was trying to do the same too. And he's like, I'm going to sacrifice myself for the crew. So after discussing that with Kuma came up with a deal where if he can take on all of Luffy's pain, so all of his injuries, all of his internal pain, if he can take that all on, then Kuma will leave and he will leave them all alone. So that's what Zoro ends up doing. After everyone wakes up the next day, Sanji immediately remembers what happened. So he's trying to look for Zoro, trying to make sure he's not injured or, dead somewhere. And he stumbles across Zoro with his arms crossed and there's just blood splattered everywhere. Obviously, he's been in a struggle somehow, and Sanji asks him, are you okay? What's happened? And Zoro just stands there and says, nothing happens. This was, in a way, it was like comedic in some way, because it's like, of course something happens, Zoro, you can't get away with that. Something has happened to you. But it was also a very significant and emotional moment, because it really showed how loyal Zoro is to Luffy and to Luffy's dream, that he was willing to sacrifice himself, get himself killed, so that Luffy can continue on and become the Pirate King. Also, with the crew members, like, he trusts his crew members and he's so loyal to his crew that he's willing to just sacrifice himself in that way. But it also shows just how strong he is. On the other side of that, he is so ridiculously strong that he's able to take on all of that pain. I mean, Luffy's made of rubber and he is a human, and he's able to take on all those injuries like an absolute boss. So that was really significant for me. So after this, everyone gets their shadow back. Obviously, Gecko Moria was punched by Luffy in the end. So all of the all of the souls ended up exiting out of his body and back into all of the human bodies. So everyone was all okay again, except for, Zoro, because he's took on all of Luffy's injuries. At the end of this arc, Brook is playing piano for everyone, because they're all having a banquet like they usually do after their intense battles and their intense adventures. They always have this banquet or this fun time afterwards. And Brook is by the piano and he's talking about his past now. He's talking fully about his backstory. And man, was this one of the most emotional stories that you could imagine, when Brook is explaining how his whole crew were poisoned, and that he was sitting there on his piano, and they were all his whole crew, because they're all kind of like musicians, and they all know that they're poisoned. They all know that they're going to die at some point, but they're like, let's play one last song. So they're all just on their instruments. They're all just having a ball, playing their instruments, playing the Binks sake, and they're all dying one by one, all these crew members. And Brook is, in the end, he's by himself, and he's the last one to die. And he's just playing piano. And that moment is just so sad. It's so emotional. And in that moment, he thinks of Laboon as well. That would have to be one of the most emotional scenes that I've watched. They all have these emotional backstories, Chopper's backstory is emotional, Robin's backstory is even Frankie. Actually, they all have such emotional backstories. So this one was very, very sad to see. Just his whole crew members just died before his eyes, and then he was that last one left. It was definitely one of my favorite scenes out of Thriller Bark, just being so emotional and just being so devastating in that moment, and why he needs to get back to Laboon so bad. It's basically his only friend from 50 years ago, so no wonder he wants to get back to Laboon so bad. And I freaking hope he does. Like, I really hope in the end he's able to get back to Laboon. And the song itself is actually so haunting now that you know exactly what happened in that scene. Every time I hear it now, it makes me really sad, and it makes me want to cry, just because of that scene. It's so emotional. Then we enter another filler arc where they get onto this spa island. This really did make me want to go on a holiday, because it looks really good. Just the resort was quite nice. However, they end up encountering these two sisters who have a book from their dad that contains information on how to create a real gem. So they're on this island trying to figure out how they can actually do this. Find out that there are a bunch of people that are also after this notebook, including the resort manager, because they obviously want to know how to make a gem so that they can make heaps of money off these gems. And this is where we get to encounter Foxy again, and his two crew members, which I've completely forgotten their names. But yeah, his two crew members, so we get to see them again. They're funny as always with his slow beam. It turns out that the X that was on the notebook the whole time is where they are on the resort island. There's a volcano underneath that island. So that was kind of like the missing link to how to create this gem. Luffy and the crew, they end up saving the sisters from all of these people trying to snatch up that notebook. After some fighting, in the end, the crew were able to rescue the sisters because they kind of got snatched up in the midst of people trying to find this notebook. And they ended up creating this gem that their father was so ridiculed for trying to create. So that was, a nice little ending to that one. Now on their way to Sabaody, they encounter this other crew whose captain looks exactly like Sanji, and in fact it is the same person who got their picture taken and was put onto Sanji's bounty. So that was a funny scene, and when Sanji ended up knocking him out so that his jaw and all of his facial structure ended up looking nothing like Sanji in the end. Well, he thinks he's all handsome, but it ended up looking nothing like Sanji. That was just a nice little filler arc, and that was like a funny little scene to see. When they were battling it out with the Flying Fish crew, they also met Hatchin and Cammy. Well, they met Hatchin again after not seeing him for a while since Arlong Park, but they also met a mermaid called Cammy. After this, they end up at Sabaody, which is an island. It's kind of like a laid-back island, I kind of felt, where they had these bubbles. So they had these massive canopy trees, and they had all these bubbles floating around, and they had a massive amusement park. But underneath it all, there were some pretty dark things that were happening with the celestial dragons, and how these celestial dragons were keeping human slaves. There would be, I think, pirate captains they were keeping as slaves. There was this whole underground black market network where they would sell off certain people as commodities. So, they were trying to, I think mermaids were one of the prized possessions. So Cammy ended up getting captured so that she could get sold. So there were just like these weird, dark underground things. And I swear these celestial dragons did my head in. I absolutely hated them. They were like the pivotal evil people that you just absolutely hate. So Cammy ends up getting captured by, I think it was just these gang members of that worked for this underground crew, and they ended up catching Cammy and taking her back to the show where they end up selling off these people as slaves. With the Flying Fisherman crew's help, they ended up going after Cammy to try and rescue her. Of course, they can't just leave her. I mean, they've made a friend with her, so then they're going to protect her at all costs, especially Luffy. So they end up getting to the place where this whole auction is happening and where they're selling off these humans. The Straw Hat crew are in there, and Nami's like, we've got enough money, we can just buy her back without making too much of a stir, because these celestial dragons, you can't touch them. They are untouchable, and that's one thing also that was just really annoying me, that no one was going to go after them because they're untouchable. So Nami was like, we've got enough money, we can try and buy her back. But this celestial dragon was really after this mermaid and ended up, going higher than the amount that they actually have. So Luffy obviously enters this place guns blazing, and he is ready to knock some people out to get Cammy back. And that's when the celestial dragon gets up and holds a gun to Luffy's head and is saying, get out of here, that mermaid is mine. Like, you can't take my mermaid, I bought her. And then Luffy ends up punching this guy straight in the face and just knocks him out. That was brilliant. That was one of the most satisfying moments yet of One Piece that I've watched. I have to say, it was incredible. That was so good, so satisfying. Definitely my favorite scene out of Sabaody. In the end, they end up saving Cammy, but on the islands they have a bunch of rookie pirate captains who are all very strong and are kind of like Luffy in a way that they have high bounties, although Kid I think has the highest bounty at this point. But we get to meet all of these other pirate captains, which was pretty cool. So in order to get out, because obviously the Marines are nearby and they're able to get onto the island really quickly, because these celestial dragons are so protected, they will send any force, like the biggest forces, to try and stop anyone that hurts a celestial dragon or lays a finger on celestial dragon. So in order to get out of this situation, Luffy, Kid, and Law end up teaming together to get out of the hole where this, the selling was taking place. And they all kind of work together, although they don't want to. They all it's a funny scene where they all walk first. They keep trying to walk first, being like, I can handle this. I don't need any of you. But in the end, they all work together to kick off the Marines. I really like Law, actually. I think it was a really cool introduction to all of them. And just the fact that they're all working together, you can see just how strong they are as individuals and as captains. I also really like Law's abilities, the room ability, where he can just create space. I don't actually fully understand it yet, but it was really cool. I did enjoy that. We were also introduced to Rayleigh at this point. I didn't really know much about Rayleigh, but I do really like him as a character. He is so strong, and it was really interesting to find out his backstory and his connection with Shanks and how they were all a part of the crew with Goldie Roger. It's really cool to see some of the backstory now of the older captains with Goldie Roger and with Shanks, and where it all kind of began in a way. They all end up going back and I guess recuperating, and Luffy needs his food in order to get stronger. So this is where Rayleigh talks a bit about his backstory. Then the crew end up heading out whilst Rayleigh is covering their ship with the special covering so that they can go underwater to get to Fishman Island, which is their goal since Water 7. This is where they end up encountering the cyborgs of Kuma. I think there was 2 of them, 2 or 3. No, sorry, there was 2 cyborgs, and then there was the real Kuma in the end. And they're trying to battle with them again and again, but they couldn't, because the cyborgs are really, really strong and they keep getting up and getting up. And so this was really taking it out of the Straw Hat crew. All of them were really beat down, and none of them could win in the end. None of them could get Kuma down. And I know that was obviously really frustrating for Luffy in the end. But this is where I guess it all happened. It all went down. Kuma ended up using his powers to blast away each member of the Straw Hat crew to different various places. And, at this time you think that he's a really evil person, but he's done this on purpose. And I don't know what that purpose is right now, but I know that there is a purpose to what he has done. So he ends up blasting them all off. Luffy is super frustrated. He's the last one to get blasted off somewhere. And then that is where the arc ends. So all in all, I did really enjoy that arc, and a lot happened, and you found out a lot. The way that it ended, I can just imagine at the time it would have been such a cliffhanger as to what on earth is going on. Where did they all go? Why have they split up? So I can just imagine at the time that would have been pretty intense last episode. Those are my thoughts on the Thriller Bark saga and the Sabaody arc. I really did enjoy the 2. I think that there were some really amazing and really cool highlights. I really liked as I've said, the scary feel of Thriller Bark. And then obviously Sabaody was very action-packed and a lot happened, and you met all of these new captains, all these new captain rookies. You met Rayleigh, understood a little bit about, their backstory. So a lot happened, especially, in Sabaody. And also meeting Brook. Brook is such an interesting character, and he's so quirky. He's such a good addition to the One Piece team. Once again, he's just someone who is completely different to the rest. That's all I have for this video, and I hope you all have a really great day. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!